Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the ND Superstars podcast. My name is Mike Bedford. I'm the host of the podcast, and today I'm absolutely delighted and thrilled to be joined by Major Simon Smith from the British Army. Hi, Simon.
Hi, Mike. Yeah, really happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time out and for kind of being our guest today on the podcast. We've got lots to talk about today, and I'm sure this will be a really enriching conversation, and hopefully it'll add a lot of value for our listeners as well in terms of what you share in terms of your own perspective of being a leader in the army, and also being a dyslexic leader in the army as well. And as a little bit of context for our listeners who might not know you or be familiar with yourself, I recently met Simon through a talk I gave at the Ministry of Defence's Dyslexia Network event, and I heard Simon sharing some of his story about being a dyslexic leader, and my ears pricked up, and I was intrigued. So I reached out to Simon and invited him on to be a guest on this podcast as well, because I just felt like Simon's got a real great story to share about being a leader and kind of helping others to really kind of be their authentic selves as well, and what role leaders play in that as well. So again, once I kind of heard that coming from Simon, I felt it really was a great story to tell. So I'm really delighted, Simon, that you've joined us today and that you're happy to kind of share some of that story with us.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it's really excited to be able to hopefully share and help others in their journey.
Yeah, no, perfect. Well, I did say we had a little bit of a preamble, didn't we, before we kind of got on there, and we were talking about a few things and things like that, and kind of what we might pick up and what we might. And as with anything, this will ebb and flow. It's a conversation, so the best laid plans, we might kind of go in a different direction to where we originally thought. But perhaps it might be useful, Simon, if you just kick off with just telling our listeners a little bit about yourself and who you are and what you do.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, thank you very much, Mike. So yeah, kind of my I'll tell you a bit about kind of my time in kind of the military in terms of what I do in the area, and then kind of a bit about my journey with dyslexia. Really, I'll kind of just chat a bit about that. So, kind of joined the army January 2011, and been in various kind of different IT communications roles. Really, has been kind of my focus for it. And for me, kind of my journey with dyslexia actually started way before then. So, and I actually started really with my brother and my parents, really, in terms of my older brother's dyslexic, and he found out through going through that kind of long arduous journey with kind of the schooling system, which I think is kind of quite natural really with a lot of people, in terms of going through the kind of the classroom environment and kind of just the general questions of kind of not really focusing that much, etc., going through a lot of different aspects like that. And then it was my parents who really pushed the schooling system to go, look, I think you might be dyslexic, can we just can we get an assessment, etc. Went down through that like long path all the way through kind of a primary school, secondary school stages and things, and managed to get an assessment. Found out he was dyslexic, and then obviously kind of that started the process of support. So for me, actually, it was just because dyslexia is probably, I don't know if many people do know, but is hereditary. So it was a kind of question for me when I kind of naturally started sharing some traits going through school, was to get that test and to go through. So since the beginning of secondary school, I've had that support pretty much all the way through. I had extra time in GCSEs. I had the IT provision, the IT support, and then when I started university, I just had the initial chat of well, what type of support do you need to be successful at university? So I had all of that. So for me, actually, by the time I joined kind of the MOD, I actually had a lot of the support mechanisms and processes and all of that kind of in place, and all of that the support I kind of needed for me to be able to all the different things which I felt challenging with certain aspects of dyslexia was already there and put in place for it for when I started it. So I've been kind of, as I say to all the people in the network, kind of one of the lucky few really, because there's the large majority of people, from what we're kind of seeing the statistics from the Defence Dyslexia Network, the large majority of people aren't being diagnosed or don't even know about it, or don't even know, they just know they have challenges and they do have struggles with it. So I'm kind of one of the lucky few really who have it. So yeah, which is part of the challenge.
And that's really interesting as well, Simon. Obviously, I didn't know that about yourself and kind of like your historical context and background as well with your brother and kind of going through the school system as well. And yeah, it's quite intriguing, isn't it? That kind of that was picked up, and then you got that support going through the system, and that support kind of empowered and enabled you because it was picked up at such a young age. And I like the fact that which I must say I think is quite unusual in from like say like from what I've heard in terms of like especially when you go to like university and things like that. And when you ask, well, what support do you need to kind of to actually be able to succeed? And I think that is how it should be. I think, and
Yeah.
it's refreshing to occasionally hear kind of a good story of kind of when you have received some of that support as well. And I think my story is very much the complete polar opposite
Yeah.
of that as well. But it is refreshing to kind of hear that that doesn't happen to everyone, but obviously it would be great if it didn't happen to anyone as well, and everyone kind of had that. They didn't have to go through that kind of horrific experience of almost being shamed, through
Mm.
school and being sort of ashamed of yourself as well, and believing that you're kind of like the problem. And I think that probably ties in a little bit kind of with what we're talking about today as well, and about leaders. I mean, what is a leader? A teacher is a leader at school, right? Kind of when you're growing up, they're your leaders, aren't they? So you look to them for kind of that leadership and that guidance. And thankfully, you kind of had some of that great, that really great leadership yourself going through that system as well. So that's interesting to kind of pick up on that. And how did that kind of then play out when you kind of then went obviously into university and then started moving into the workplace and things like? Because often we hear that even other neurodivergences, so someone perhaps with ADHD or autism might actually do quite well academically, but
Mm.
actually when they hit the workplace, that's where their struggles actually really start to begin as well. I'm just wondering what that journey was like for you, if kind of you had
Mm.
a decent kind of journey through education, and then you kind of like came out of that into higher education and then into the workplace. What was that journey like? Was that a smooth journey, or did you have any kind of like challenges there?
So that's a really good question. So for my journey all the way through academia, I fully agree in terms of my journey being quite a rare one, and I like, and the reason why I'm really keen to try and share kind of my route is without, this is where it kind of does sound quite naturally kind of big-headed in the phrase, but in terms of, I feel like I managed to succeed in a lot of different areas for
Mm,
it because I've been given that support for it, and to want to show other people who do have dyslexia or who are neurodiverse to say that you have the ability to succeed if you are supported, and to show other people to say that we all can thrive and excel definitely for it if we're given the support, the
yeah.
opportunities, and the support from kind of line management for it. But in terms of specifically what you said about the support I received there, I didn't see um, any focus on any negativity towards dyslexia whatsoever, because I've
Mm,
just known it throughout my
mm,
whole life. So I've never
yeah.
even thought about it in any different negative context or connotation for it. And
Mm,
then even in terms of the workplace, it never really just got discussed. It never got mentioned or never even was part of any conversation for it.
mm,
It was just a case of me getting and utilizing the supporting mechanisms I had
mm,
to try and do that. I mean, I must admit it was probably challenging in the workplace environment a bit more,
yeah.
when kind
Yeah.
of when faced with probably tighter deadlines to do,
Mm,
and to press myself and challenge myself in the written work, particularly kind of report writing, the big thing
mm,
in the military. And as a leader, you're straight away into the report writing mechanism and the report writing churn, which you've got to do. And then there's probably a fair few challenges which I've kind of gone through, and I felt of producing a work and then being told, well, actually, you need to be
mm,
better at that. You need to be better, and you need to get that written work to a high standard.
yeah.
And the challenges kind of I think I found is when you write down and someone gives you work to get better at, and then to say, well, this is a list of errors you've made, and me to try and say, well, actually, I'm probably going to make those errors again and again, and there's
Mm,
I
mm,
can try and learn about some things, but there's just some stuff is it's going to
mm,
take me longer, and it's just always going to take me longer. And
mm,
so the way I've done is just had to work my own timelines to make sure I can
mm,
factor that in, to make sure I can actually achieve what I need to by the certain deadlines and certain timelines.
mm,
And that's it. But I've only felt that that's been easier for me because I've had that sporting
mm,
mechanism, sporting processes in place for such a long period of time. Whereas for those who we're chatting to from the Defence Dyslexia Network who
mm,
don't have that support mechanism in place from an earlier on, they've had to do all of that learning, finding out about themselves in shorter order, in a tighter timeline, while also doing their job and
mm,
learning about what they need to do and finding their own place in their own organisation or whatever sub-organisation they're part of.
mm. Yeah. No, it's interesting, is that, and thank you again for sharing that. And it sounds to me what I'm hearing there, Simon, is that that kind of role of self advocacy is really important as well, there, and being able to self advocate. And you sound like someone, because of the kind of like the background and that kind of familiarity with dyslexia, and being able to kind of accept that as who you are, and kind of that's followed you through your journey as well, being able to then be able to self-advocate
Mm.
for what you need as well. What do you think, would you say to kind of those who perhaps who haven't been in that kind of position? How can they kind of self-advocate? If you were to kind of, I guess, put yourself in a different shoes, and kind of maybe you hadn't
Yeah.
had that kind of experience, what do you think you could do there to kind of better self-advocate?
I think that's really difficult because I think there's two different parts to that. And I think it's nearly a balance of 60-40, 60% kind of line manager or train of command support, and then
Mm,
40% of the kind of the individual. Because to make that step, it needs huge amounts of kind of psychological safety. I know that's
mm,
obviously one of the things which we'll touch upon
yeah.
for it, but it's very easy to say to people that, oh, you need to just tell people about it and talk
Yeah.
about it and say your story and say what you struggle with and things like that. But
Mm,
it's a real difficult challenge, and there's loads of instances, loads of people in the defence section network who've all kind of said that they struggle to tell their line manager because they don't want to
mm,
be identified as a negative, and it might
yeah.
affect what they feel as being perceived as what they'll be reported on, and that's completely natural. So it's to for us, line manager awareness or chain command awareness is such a huge part of it, because
Yeah.
without that, then people won't be able to feel comfortable enough to say what they need to say and to actually come out and say that.
Mm,
And I think having a network is a key part of giving people that environment to say, look,
mm,
you are not alone. I mean, the statistics alone say, I mean, 1 in 10, as low as 1 in 10 is dyslexia. So it's a kind of,
mm,
you are definitely going to be not alone in your organization. It's just,
mm,
I think it's people will have that ability to say it, but once you give them the greater support mechanisms around them to be
mm,
able to actually give them the voice to do it, because to be the lone person in the room saying something which probably feels like to them is quite a big challenging
yeah.
thing to say, they can't be expected to do that alone. And I don't think we should expect that of individuals within
Mm,
any organization to do that. We
mhm,
have to give them the supporting mechanisms and the conditions to be successful, so they won't have the fear of reprisal, won't have all of the fear of it. We can't just say to individuals, oh, we
mm,
just need to speak out more because that will help all of the other things. It will, and if you have the
mhm,
confidence to do that,
mm, mm,
it will help and set positive conditions for it. And most likely, most line managers who we have spoken to about this, they are really willing. They want to hear from people
mm,
about it, that if they are dyslexic and what they can do to support them, because ultimately everyone wants to just support everyone else. So it's definitely, we push on an open door, but
mm,
I understand and people's apprehension. So those are the
mm.
things there. If that kind of answers the question.
It does, yeah. It makes a lot of sense actually, and it's not always easy as just being able to self-advocate, is it? I think
Mm,
is what we're saying, and it depends on your kind of your background and your lived experience and all those things that kind of make you who you are and where you've got to on that journey, doesn't it? As
mm.
well. And I think if we're talking about then perhaps what some of the barriers are for people to kind of self-advocate and to be authentic, what role then do leaders such as yourself and other leaders have to play in that context, in making it safe, in creating psychological safety and building that trust?
So I think, and this is where some of the key things you kind of you mentioned about the things you kind of touched on today. Vulnerability, I just think, is such a huge part in that. And if all the leaders can say what their worries, struggles, and apprehensions are, and where their own shortfalls are, and where they need to develop, that provides an environment for other people to do it. And I think
Mm,
Adam Grant, who's a great organizational culture advocate and kind of working some amazing things and done some amazing books about organizational culture.
mm,
One of the things he talks about, kind of blaming and shaming culture and things like that. If you blame
mm,
people and you create shame for it, then that doesn't stop mistakes. It just stops the ability for people to admit their own mistakes and admit where their shortfalls are. Whereas if you create for it, in transparency, I think personally is a quite a key thing for it to do. And transparency creates that ability and that vulnerability and that kind of ability for people to talk and be open a little bit more for it. And it all starts with kind of the leader at the top of whatever organization or whatever
mm,
sub-organization you sit in, really. So I think that's absolutely absolutely key, is kind of the vulnerability to as a big area, and it's a real difficult and challenging thing, if I'm
mm,
being honest, as a leader, to do that, because you've got to lead, you've got to be that person at the front of everyone and tell people and sometimes kind of show them the way and be at the
mm,
front sometimes for it. And it's very difficult to do that sometimes if you admit a vulnerability. So you have to be kind of very confident in your own abilities as an overall leader, that you're adding value to a team.
mm,
But it's I think that's probably kind of the key component to setting an environment for it. And then so obviously some of the going down to the specific stuff from the dyslexia side in terms of opening up and being transparent about the way in which you write and about people's struggles and challenges, and making sure you give people the tools to be better and where to find help and support and how to get better at writing, as if it's reports, or how to get writing certain documents and things like that. I think that's absolutely key, to give people the tools, because a lot of things I think I've seen from previous roles is people kind of go, we need to get better at this, and they say an area they want to get better, but they don't give any tools or a path to do it. So you can give that guiding light, that star, that vision of where you want to get to, but if you don't provide potential steps along the way, or routes to those steps, or supporting elements or tools or tactics or techniques to get to those supporting elements, then you're not going to be able to give people the potential to do that. And then it's going to feel frustrating if they don't go on all those steps, because you've not given them those elements, then they're gonna less likely to achieve it. But it's difficult with doing that without specifying the exact path of what you think is there. So it's challenging, but those kind of two things, giving the tools and techniques and tips in order to develop themselves, but then also kind of enabling and saying, I don't get it right all the time, just saying that to people, I think is quite useful.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. And what would you say has been your experience then, Simon, of being, quite open about who you are and your dyslexia in the workplace as a leader?
Well, weirdly, actually, and this is where I feel kind of a bit of a fraud when talking about it, is I've actually not told hardly anyone I was dyslexic before kind of really we started Defence Dyslexia Network. But this is all ties back to, I never really saw it as a disadvantage as such, but I never really either considered the advantages or disadvantages of dyslexia as much. I just saw it as a thing which I have, and it's not really been I've not really considered it, if that makes sense. It just maybe take me a bit longer doing some stuff, but I never really thought about it. So now I am quite open about it, and I talk to people about it, but mainly because I'm trying to be an advocate for kind of behalf of the network. That's kind of the main side. But in the immediate workplace, I'm just kind of the way I try to do it is saying that the written work, I don't focus on the absolute precision of absolutely anything. I just focus on, does this document convey the information of what it needs to get the output of what's required? And if it is, then that's absolutely brilliant. And that's what, and then to get it to that position is always a difficult road anyway. So I like to think anyway, I mean, everyone else who I work with can probably maybe say something different, but I like to think I'm quite kind of praiseworthy of doing those initial steps, because to be the first person to write something down is always a really, really difficult position. Even if you're getting a template to work from, it is a really difficult position. So to kind of that's kind of been the key thing really within kind of my immediate team for it. I've been kind of doing to and just be, I mean, I've been obviously open about being selective within my team, but I kind of don't want to be that as the focus for it, because we've got so many different other things and areas which we're trying to do. So I try to otherwise I feel like it takes the attention away from them and how to develop them, and it kind of brings it on to me if I talk about that side really for it. But one of the most recent conversations I had with someone I work with, he said to me, like, well, how do you like information? How do you best receive information for it? Because the worst thing I do is when I receive emails with like several big blocks of text and stuff like that, it will just take longer to read. I won't be able to get the precise information from it. Whereas for me, I live in bullet points and things like that. So and I get that information now from kind of that individual and wider. Just that's how people give me information, and it means I can get the information, process it, and then give them a response or output to what they need, hopefully quicker. But,
Yeah, no, that's some really good points there. And that communication between people is really important, isn't it? Whether you're neurodivergent or whether you're neurotypical, it's really important to understand that we all work in different ways, and we need to kind of have that open dialogue, don't we, to understand how we can get the best results from each other. And particularly when you're working where teamwork's really important as well. I think that's really important, so that you're not, whether it's conscious or unconsciously, kind of creating barriers for people. I think it's really important. I think that's a really good, fair and valid point there, Simon, as well. I wondered, kind of, in terms of obviously you being open and transparent about you are, what impact have you noticed from others in terms of, when you've been out talking? I think you talked when I came along and did the MOD talk, And when you've given a talk, and people have perhaps approached you afterwards and kind of had a chat with you about things, has that kind of, had you really ever thought about that before, about kind of your impact on others as a leader when you're actually sharing and being open about this?
So yes, I do. I do think about what people take away from it, and it's a real difficult thing. And this is, I think, imposter syndrome is a really, really big thing, because I kind of think, so who am I to go and talk to all these people when I've not got any formal qualifications in anything to do with the subject matter I'm talking about. I'm talking about a bit of personal experience. I'm talking about experience from us having set up a network over a year ago with about kind of 1,000 members now. It's kind of what justification do I have to say and talk about this and talk? Sometimes I like to think with confidence about the subject matter I'm talking about, but with no kind of authority, if that sense. And then it's that balance between I've got to go out there and talk confidently to make sure I get a positive message across about what people need to take away, particularly kind of line managers for it, and then also for people who are dyslexic to kind of identify potential traits in themselves. But I kind of think to myself, well, there's space and there's gap and hopefully utility, because people are asking us to go and do these talks for it. So kind of if not me, then who, is kind of the way I try to think about it in terms of that, in terms of having that impact. So and so I kind of think the impact I kind of get afterwards is generally, I mean, it's all been really, really positive. No one's kind of said, I don't think that was kind of that much of a useful talk. And in my head, I kind of, the backup for it to kind of reinforce any type of potential imposter syndrome is always kind of going, well, any time which anyone takes to self-reflect about their situation they're in, or their workplace environment, or their relationships with each other who they work with, that time's never really, it's never a wasted bit of time, even if they're spending the whole time when I'm talking just thinking about something completely different. But if they are, then they're just taking that time to think and digest the information. And especially in now where that kind of work from home and remote working is more prevalent, it's people are going from back-to-back meetings all the time, and they're not taking that time to digest and process the conversations they've had, or the work they're doing, or any of the interactions they're having. Really, they're just kind of going straight away in between from something to there. So I think that's kind of absolutely key for it. And I apologize, I've probably not answered the question. I can't really remember exactly what the key part of it was.
No, keep going, please.
So kind of, it just those talks are kind of, if there is chance that I've kind of sparked an idea in at least one person's head to go, do you know what, actually, either I might be dyslexic, or actually, do you know what, there's a person who I've talked to in my team, and there's a mismatch between what their output is and what their written word is generally, which is the tagline, which I think Made by Dyslexia put out, as in how to spot someone with dyslexia. Then they go, okay, well, actually, that might apply. So then that might give them freedom, especially if that other person's in the talk, to kind of go to them and go, oh, like, we had that talk, like, do you feel like, do you want to chat about that a bit more, or do you think you want to do it, or am I giving you enough support? It's kind of a really good phrase I think a lot of line managers could take away. Or what support can I do to help you develop and help you be better? And that's kind of, that links, I think, kind of heavily with kind of the coaching side, in terms of coaching people, developing people, and things like that. And there's some really good taglines in helping from coaching and from coaching books which say about how to get people and develop them to get the best out of them. It's really good. And I think the only thing which we need to do more as a network is capture the feedback from these talks which we go out and give. And a big thing from outside from the Defence Dyslexia Network is really we have a phrase, a little tagline called "Be the Network," where we want people to go and be advocates for dyslexia, for the network across the whole of Defence. And we've had at least 5 or 6 people who approached us going, hi, I'm really, really cheeky, but can I steal all of your slides of what you've used? And so I want to present to my immediate team to share the awareness, share the ideas. And I'm like, absolutely. I said, talk on behalf of the network, talk as if you are the top person in terms of how much contribution you've made to the network for it. Because at that point, during that time, you are the person who's adding the most value for the network on behalf of the Defence for it. So kind of go with that confidence, because no one knows your lived experience apart from yourself, and it's
Yeah.
absolutely key and vital to get that and share that message. And like I said, if the worst case, it gives people just half an hour out of work just to kind of think about something else apart from like being fully immersed in work, then it's a benefit. Yeah, and it's going to really good. I mean, now as a network, we've got over 100 ambassadors around the whole of defence from across all the different 3 services and the civil service as well, who are there to be points of contact, to raise a hand, say, look, I'm dyslexic, I'm here. If anyone wants any support in all the different areas and things like that, because if you know you've got those friendly people and those approachable people who are there to be willing to talk about dyslexia and to share positive message, then that's kind of I'd say half the battle, maybe 1/3 of the battle, maybe a quarter. I don't know where it sits really, but it definitely helps.
No, thank you. Thanks for those reflections. And I think what I heard there is you're helping give people a voice.
Mm,
And I think that's so important because those people might not necessarily have a voice.
mm,
And actually, just starting a conversation is so important, right? So by you sharing your story and by others sharing their story, by giving people that space to reflect. I think you talked about there that kind of like that time away from work, as you put it, is just that time to think, isn't it?
mm,
And that time to think can create, that space to actually think about, actually this is something that I've kind of wanted to talk about for a while, but I've not had the courage to do that. But actually now hearing like yourself, Simon, or others talk, could inspire that person or people to actually be able to reach out and start that conversation as well. So sounds to me that there's definitely an impact there in terms of kind of the work that you're doing across the MOD and beyond as well. So congratulations on all that great work that you are doing as well. I think it's really important work as well. So congratulations and well done on that. I told you this conversation would absolutely fly by,
yeah,
didn't I?
yeah,
And
yeah, it's
and
good.
and and and, and true to form, it really is as well. And we've talked about quite a lot of different things there, haven't we, in a short space of time as well. And keeping with the kind of like the overall theme of our conversation, I wondered whether perhaps you could, from your own experience of again of being a leader and leading people, what would be your 5 top tips then for leaders to be their authentic selves to generate everything that we've talked about today?
That's a really good question to trying to get the 5 top tips. I always like to do things in 3, so I might try and cheat and just kind of do 3, so I might
Go
not be able
for
to
it.
think of 5, if I'm being honest. But um, it's I heard a phrase, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's kind of something along the lines of with trends be kind of like a bottle floating on the top of the water, but with your foundations or your beliefs be a rock, in terms of just like certain things will come and go in the workplace, and then just let them go by and kind of let people take you where they want to go for wherever they think is the best thing to do for that. But if you believe, if you in your heart of hearts think it and it's your gut of what you think is the best thing to do, then be a rock and don't change on it, and actually you be rigid with that, because people respect you for it. And I think that creates that authenticity and creates the same what part of it you want to do yourself, to drive that culture which you want to set within the organization. Absolutely key. And then I think kind of vulnerability, I think I learned this within kind of my current job, in terms of when you turn up and try to be your authentic self, which is really good, but the problem is with it, it's if you be too authentic within yourself, then you lose kind of some of that command leadership style, which sometimes you need to be able to achieve where you need to go. So kind of think about how are you going to keep the maintenance of certain key elements of what you need for that structure, that position you're in, to maintain the output and the effect which you need to do. Because it's actually quite challenging sometimes to know how to be yourself and every single day in work, but also maintaining enough of the structure and stability for what the team needs to get the best out of you, to then so you can give the best back to the team. Kind of a bit of a long way of saying it's kind of like pick and choose bit of stuff for your kind of authenticity. And I think I see a lot of different images all the time about kind of the leadership hierarchy, and it's always a triangle, and you get narrower as you go up, and you have more people down at the bottom and things like that. And to try and inverse that pyramid is the constant thing which people say, to kind of give that focus up, to kind of focus that people the energy down and things like that. And the way I'd like to do it is think about yourself as authentic, as you either an up arrow or down arrow. And if you're an up arrow, that means that you're constantly driving, you're there to support information to the people above you, which sometimes that's needed, but sometimes that's not going to be the best for the people below you. So therefore, you're pulling the resources from everyone below you to feed the structure above you. And the structure above you only exists purely to ultimately, technically, to support the people at the bottom. Whereas if you're a down arrow, that means that what you do is you gain and absorb the resources and support from people above you to provide that in a specific way to certain people below. And therefore, it means that you're protecting as much as you can the people below, to give them the freedom of movement to do what they need to do in the different areas they need to focus. So kind of those three different things about being kind of the bottle in the water, then the rock with your core beliefs, that side in terms of picking and choosing exactly the areas you want to focus on to be the authentic self, and then those that up arrow or down arrow really is the analogy I like to do. So I think if I had a little bit more time to kind of probably think about it, I'll probably come up with two more, but I like to think those three are pretty hopefully quite useful, and hopefully something I do anyway. But I think my team will be able to comment on that a little bit more.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And I appreciate that's a bit of a putting you on the spot type question as well. So well done on answering that question as well. It's a tough one, make no mistake. And what I like to kind of finish off with, Simon, at the end of each conversation is just kind of a reflective question. We talked about the importance of reflection, didn't we? I think earlier on as well. So a bit of a reflective question for you then, as part of this conversation that we've had today. What was most useful for you in this conversation we've had today?
I think what's most useful is for me to take a look at kind of the external message which I'm saying to people, and to kind of think about what impact we're having as a network, and the way I think and process information is actually sometimes kind of just talking things through, which I think my team will probably not be too happy with, as I constantly go and chat with them my ideas and my thoughts about how to get where I think we want to go. So it's that space and time to think and chat through, and to kind of be used effectively as a sounding board in that sense, to kind of to get my thoughts and to kind of hear them a little bit more. So no, I think it's really useful for me as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks again for answering that question as well. And yeah, we've kind of reached the end of the road in terms of our conversation and our time. It feels like it's been no time at all, and it's been a really valuable conversation, and I'm sure our listeners will take a lot of value from this. And as we said, hopefully it'll help engage and inspire someone out there listening to this conversation as well, and for others can take away some top tips as well and think about their leadership style and their impact on others as well. So yeah, really appreciate your time and for this conversation today, Simon. And if people would like to kind of connect with you and kind of get in touch or reach out to you, how can they do that?
So if you're on the MOD system, if you search me, Simon Smith, my name is obviously spelled a bit uniquely, SYMON, then you'll find me on the system for it. I'm kind of the only one as a major Simon Smith, I believe, at the moment. So you should be able to find me. Or if you're in on ModNet as a kind of the main MOD internal system, search Defence Dyslexia Network, and then our page is pretty much kind of the first ones there for it. Or there's kind of a staff networks list and directory, which is on the kind of the main SharePoint side, main homepage as well. So kind of there's three different mechanisms, but yeah, I'm kind of really keen to keep the conversation going, and anyone who wants to reach out to me direct, I always love to hear it in terms of any feedback or anything, and to connect with and do anything further. So yeah, no, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, no, thanks. And I think you're on LinkedIn as well, aren't you, Simon? So people can perhaps
yeah.
chat with you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I don't know how to technically kind of link myself for it. I think if you search my name, I might be able to be findable. But I think you probably go through you. You've tagged me quite a few things in that, Mike. So I don't know how to link to myself directly to LinkedIn. But yeah, more than happy to be reached out on there as well.
I'll pop a link in for those that are perhaps listening outside of the civil service and government who have really resonated and perhaps would like to just connect with you in some capacity, or chat to you, who work outside of government as well. So I'll pop a link in for people to be able to kind of reach out and send a connection request through for you on that. And yeah, fantastic. And thanks again so much for the conversation, and for sharing what you have shared with us today. It's been a really valuable conversation. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here.